So this is Marianne from the Wagon Quilt Company, and this is block 5 of our Homegrown block of the month, and we're happy to have all of you here. Today we're going to be talking about 4 different stitches that you will use on your quilt, and if you have any questions about the putting together of the blocks, we can talk about those too. Have any of you finished them or have worked on them and have any questions? No? Good so far? Has anyone not started theirs? Okay, good. Okay, the first 2 stitches that I'm going to talk about today, one is called, and I mix them up in my head, so one of them is a purl stitch and the other one is a coral stitch. And when you do these, they look very similar when they're done, but they are done a little bit differently. So I'm going to show you how to do each of them. I'm going to demonstrate it here with the camera if any of you want to come up and look at it, and then the rest of you I can come and show you again how to do it. I'm going to start with a coral stitch because it's actually the harder one, and it's taken me just a little while to figure it out. I found that in the Sue Spargo book I had a harder time, so I did get out my right-handed guide to embroidery, and I found it was just a little bit easier. Sometimes I have a hard time, like Liz mentioned, that you have to turn the page to keep going, and my hands are working, and so sometimes it's hard. So sometimes I find one book's a little easier for me, and it may just be because of my learning style. So if you have a couple of books or even use tutorials, then they can be really helpful too. So I'm going to show you the purl stitch if any of you want to come up, and then I'll come out and do it again.
Say the name of the stitch.
Pearl, like a pearl necklace, and I can look it up here. The purl stitch is going to be on page 71 if you want to turn your book to that one. What the purl stitch does is gives you a little knot, and Sue Spargo uses it a lot for outlining and such. And it doesn't really show up if you use a really small thread. So it's kind of worthless unless you're using a little bit heavier thread. So I'm going to demonstrate using this number 3. This is from a thread from Thread Gatherers. And so it's a hand-dyed thread. You can see the variation in it. And these painter's threads are all size 3. So they're a much chunkier yarn. They'd be the same size as this Sue Spargo one right here, the 3. And it will give a much more distinct stitch if you're using a bigger one. I probably wouldn't use 8. I'd go with 5 or 3 if I'm using the purl stitch. So first of all, I'm going to bring my thread up through. I've done a couple of purl stitches here, and I find it easier to go away from myself as I'm stitching this. So what I'm going to do, and she suggests about 1/4 inch. This might be just a little bit bigger because I'm demonstrating, but you take a little bite going horizontally in your fabric and pull your thread through. And then the tricky part happens. Then you're going to take, and I am using a chenille needle, so it has a blunt end. I think that's one thing I've had a problem with some of these instructions because they turn the needle around. And it's hard for me to figure it out by just looking at the pictures. So I'm going to use the blunt end here. So I'm going to go into that little stitch that I made right here. And that will be pointing away from myself. I've turned it. And then what you do with the purl stitch is you actually twist your needle. So I'm going to twist it clockwise all the way down to the bottom until it's about 7 o'clock. Oh my word. And then I'm going to take my thread here and wrap it around again clockwise. And I'm kind of awkward doing this, I have to admit.
Have we done this one before?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
And I'm going to hold it while I pull this through, and it makes a little knot. And so those are supposed to kind of be like little pearls. So I'll do it again. I'm going to take a little bite in my fabric and pull it all the way through. And I like to turn it around, it's just easier for me. Then I put my needle through here without catching the fabric. And then I'm actually not twisting my thread yet, I'm just twisting the needle.
It's incredible.
So it used to be at 12 o'clock. I'm gonna move it all the way around to 7 o'clock. And then I'm gonna take my thread and wrap it around. And then I can hold it there while I pull my thread through. So if it looks awkward, it feels awkward.
It does.
Okay, let's do it one more time. I'm gonna take a bite, pull it all the way through, and then I'm gonna put my thread through so it's pointing up at 12 o'clock. And then I'm gonna actually twist my needle all the way down to 7 o'clock.
Or 2 o'clock if you're left-handed.
That's
'cause I'm
right.
looking this way.
And then again, clockwise around that needle. I'm gonna pinch it there with my finger
That's cool.
and make a little
Okay,
knot.
that is really fun.
Okay?
Interesting. Mary Ann,
Yeah.
if I do it left-handed, I may try to if I do it
Mhm.
left-handed, would I be doing things not? Are we doing counterclockwise and also twisting the?
Are you left-handed too?
I am.
Do you have the left-handed look like this?
Yeah.
I do. I do.
And it says right here,
Wonderful.
left-handers work this stitch rotated 180 degrees, traveling from left to right.
Okay.
But I have found that with this stitch, this book actually is really good at instructions. And so I would just get out your book here
Okay.
and follow
Very
them. Uh-huh. Okay.
So do you always lay it down, or, I mean, have you gotten to the point where you can just sit and do it without?
This is not a stitch I do a lot. And so I sort of had to learn it to show you. So I'm not, if it looks awkward, like I said, I am a little awkward at doing it. Do you want me to do it one more time?
Yeah, 'cause I
So
wanna go home and practice this.
I'm taking a bite from right to left. And then I'm going to switch it around and point my needle up at 12 o'clock. It's kind of nice to straighten your threads out as you're doing this so they don't get all twisted around. And then I'm going to take this needle point of my needle and twist it all the way around to 7 o'clock. And then I'm going to wrap this around clockwise, pinch it,
And pull it through.
and pull it through. So there you go.
It is.
It's so fun, you know.
Do you want me to come closer with you guys out there and show
Yeah,
you?
no, I'll go in here, come over here.
No? Okay, I'm gonna do next of all, and I have to look at these because I get these two mixed up all the time, the coral stitch. So let me look and see what page that one is on.
42.
Thank you. So
Turned right to it.
42 is the coral stitch. This one looks very much the same as this one, but it is a little bit easier. I think the little knot that you make doesn't turn out quite as big.
Do you do it in a bigger thread as well?
Yes, I would. I would do it in a big thread.
You mentioned that this thread is not an eleganza, right? When
It
you're
is
using
not. This is a painter's thread. It's from
You said thread gatherers?
Thread Gatherers. And it's a hand-dyed thread, where this one is probably not hand-dyed. She does it in equal amounts with the variation. And this one, you can see in this piece here, it'll be a lot lighter and this a lot darker, but they're not evenly spaced.
Would you recommend that we go get it then? Is it not, because it's not in our kit, right?
No, it's not, but it's a beautiful thread and I like using it. So, I mean, there's benefits to all the different kinds of threads. Some I love, some I don't like as much, but, try some different ones. You don't always have to use exactly what the instructions tell you. You can always switch it up a little bit. Lynn's not here, but she said she was proud of herself because she didn't put the bunny on hers. She decided not to do the bunny. I said, look, you're being so creative, So I like everybody to be creative. Okay, this one's called the coral stitch. It's very similar, but I'm just going to keep going here instead. Well, maybe I'll stop. And I'm going to come down here, and so we can see them side by side. Maybe that'll be good. So with the coral stitch, again, I'm going to take that little bite like this, about 1/4 of an inch from the last where I came up. And instead of doing all the twisting and turning, all you're doing on this one is coming up and around.
So that's a counterclockwise around, huh?
And
Okay.
Oh,
It's
that
forming a
looks
knot.
much easier than the
So-
other one.
I'm making a little bite, and I'm going up and around, and yes, it is counterclockwise.
I think I like that stitch.
But you can see how they look really similar.
They do.
Not quite
And-
as thick, not quite as,
I probably, go to this one if I don't have my book, because I could figure out how to do it without thinking too hard. So I'm just coming up and around, pulling it through, and it makes a knot.
Nice.
That's
One more
much
time.
easier than the other one.
Take the little bite, and I'm doing them pretty far away. You might not do them quite so far
so you could
away.
actually do them closer. And have it, right?
And then up and around the needle, going counterclockwise. Pull it through and tighten it up. So
Oh, that's fine.
in your
Can I touch it?
Uh-huh.
Feel how different.
yeah, you'll find that they're used in pretty much the same way. She outlines a lot with this. You kind of get a similar look actually when you couch. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, we can take it, and it looks like there's a lot of couching on these blocks that
There's
you're
a lot of
doing.
couching in the last one too. Yeah.
But with couching, you're just going to lay down the thread and go over the top. And so from far away,
Yeah, it does look the same.
your couching almost looks the same or very similar. But what you're doing is just taking a thread and going around it to outline it. Or I like to sometimes use more contrasting colors than Sue Spargo does, because she uses a lot of matching colors, and I don't think you always see the threads or your work
Yeah.
quite as distinctly. So, and maybe I'll show you this. Can you hand me that, Susie?
Yes?
Yes. I'm doing this quilt, and it's a block. We'll do it as a block of the month. But
Blow your mind.
but what I found, and I'm just going to show you, is there are a couple of places in this, like this jar right here, that I put it on there, and I didn't like how it receded into the background. So I've just gone around it with a contrasting thread. so it pops out, so you can see it better. And I've done it in several places on this quilt because it didn't seem to pop quite as much as I wanted. So I've used in a lot of places, just something
Is
a
this
little
all
contrasting.
I
Uh-huh.
think, oh, I love the.
Well, the background isn't.
Yeah, but I mean, just the appliques. all
I've
over.
also done it on my beehive here. You can see that
Yeah.
it just makes it just a little bit more distinct.
Gives it more depth.
Are you gonna do this block at the month starting in January?
I don't know, we'll see when we're, probably at the end of the summer we'll start.
Oh, okay, good.
Oh, the pressure.
Now, the pearl stitch or the coral stitch are probably not my favorite. My go-to stitch is often just a chain stitch.
But it looks so good.
But
Yeah.
it gives you that double thread, so you can use a thinner thread. So you'll see with almost all of these, because I didn't have any instructions, that I've just gone with whichever pops into my head. And I've done a lot of this outlining just with a little chain stitch. I think this is a size 12, so I didn't want it to be too distinct that, people are saying, oh, look, she outlined that. But I just wanted it to show up just a little bit more.
Oh, that's gonna be so
I
nice.
know.
Oh, I love the cat and the mouse.
And I did put a little stitch here, and I just did a back stitch there.
Uh-huh.
So you could see that the tail, I don't know if you can see it in that the tail is distinct from the rest of his body.
So it doesn't blend
But I don't
in.
want people to look at it and say, oh, look, she's outlined that. I just want it to be sort of indistinct. And I have gone around this one too. I did go around with a light thread, and it wasn't distinct enough.
Is that fair?
So I actually wrapped it with
Yeah, I
a
was gonna say
different
you're
color.
practicing.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I did a back stitch
Uh-huh.
and with the light color, and it wasn't distinct enough, and I didn't want to pull it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I just took a darker thread and wrapped it around.
Oh,
And so it almost looks variegated,
yeah, it does.
but it makes it pop just a little bit more so you can see it.
Cool.
So I'll put this out when we get done. You can see it. I'm not done quite yet. Okay, so those two are really similar, and they're going to be outline stitches a lot of the time. And the next one, and I was going to bring my little pillow thing, but that's okay. I'm going to do the drizzle, which is kind of our favorite. Don't we love the drizzle?
Never done it.
The drizzle is
It's
really
one that sticks out.
dramatic.
Yeah.
And when people see the drizzle, or when they see things that are done, they always go right to the drizzles because they're just so fun and dramatic. When you're doing a drizzle, you want to use a Milner needle. So a Milner needle is going to be really straight up and down. So as you put your cast-ons on it and you try to pull it through, if you were to use a tapestry or a chenille needle, then it would be hard to pull it through because that part of the needle wouldn't come through. I'm gonna do this little house thing. It's one from Sue Spargo, and she just has some little drizzles coming down like a ivy vine or something. It is nice sometimes to have a little pillow or a little thing that you can stick your needle into, because when I do a drizzle, I bring it up and then back into about the same hole.
Sue Sparkle has those little.
She does. She has a little
round
pad.
things,
Uh-huh.
So you can use one of those.
You can.
Okay.
And sometimes your upper legs don't work very well. It kind of hurts, so. Okay, so what I'm going to do is bring it up with my needle, and then I'm going to unthread it and take the thread out.
Oh,
And if you knit or you crochet, you're probably familiar with casting on, or you've done some other stitches too. And casting on, you basically just wrap your finger around the thread
yes.
and then
Yeah.
put it onto the needle. So I'm going to wrap my finger around and up and over. And whoops. So the more you cast on, the longer your drizzle will be.
That's all a drizzle is made
Oh,
of.
yeah.
Wow, how cool.
Now the reason that it twists, have you seen drizzles that kind of twist around? And the reason it twists is because you're putting all of your cast-ons exactly the same way. There is another stitch where you alternate and go back and forth, twisting it opposite ways, and it will make a drizzle, I don't even know what it's called, but a drizzle-like stitch that sticks straight up rather than twisting. So you're making it twist by doing all of your cast-ons exactly the same way. So I could count, but I didn't because I was talking and I can't do two things at once.
We should have counted for you.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because, you know, an ivy vine is some are gonna be shorter than others, so I'm not too worried about them being exactly the same. Now your tree that you have in there that has at least 1,000 drizzles on it, have you seen that? No, I'm sort of exaggerating.
All right.
But it feels like at least 1,000. You probably want to count them just so they're all about the same length. And so there are times when you want to count your cast-ons.
That's the mistake I made with the roof.
You didn't get them all the same. And the roof, how many of you finished the roof?
Painfully.
Isn't that just...
Painfully, yeah, and I cut mine all off and I took it off.
I did.
And
It looks so bad.
we have
I don't care.
one of our cute ladies that used to work here, she named a quilt, What the Hell Was I Thinking? And that's kind of what that roof should be called. Okay, so, and one thing that you'll notice with drizzles is that once they squish down, they're not nearly as long as you think they are.
Oh, you want to
okay.
squish them down. It's okay.
Yeah, kind of squish, see, if I squish it down, that's how long it's gonna be, see?
Oh.
So you do put a lot on them.
So let me put just a couple more. Plus, I like the little light thing at the end, you know, the little light piece. That's kind of fun.
That's why I love the multicolored flair. It
Yeah.
gives it just a fun little.
And then what I'm going to do is thread this again. And without a little spit, it doesn't work. These Milner needles kind of have small eyes, so you kind of have to force it through there
No.
sometimes.
She made it.
Not quite.
Yeah, I have a hard time threading.
Little spit makes it work. So
Okay, and I've made this thread pretty long because you can't stop in the middle of this stitch. Now in this one, Sue Spargo, this is her pattern, but she puts a little tiny bead at the end of each of these, and that would be really fun. So before you thread it, she just slips a little bead onto the end.
oh, so before you do this last thread.
Yes,
you go
yes.
that way.
Fun.
Cute. Does she tell you what size bead to put on?
It would have to be a pretty small one, but your Milner needle's pretty
was gonna say
thick,
your
so it's
Milner
gonna
needle's
have to be a
gotta be the
medium
whole-
one.
Okay.
You have to play with the beads until you find one that fits.
And then I'm gonna pull this
It's quite
through, and
messy.
it's always just a little tricky to get your threads quite right.
Fun.
I always get it jammed in there. I'm gonna cut. No, okay, there we go.
It's the twisting of the thread that does that, isn't it? The little.
It does. So
Oh, there you go.
there's my cute little drizzle.
Oh my gosh, that's darling.
That's cute.
So you guys good with that? You want me to show you one more time? You're good.
There's my pink room.
Drizzles are just fun because they're just
hang there. Oh, cute.
they're just so dramatic. Now, I've done ones where I've done, you know, them this long. So you can make them huge. You're just gonna have to keep pushing it down onto your needle to get, you know, 50 cast-ons on there. But that's gonna make a really long drizzle, and they can be really dramatic. So drizzle's one of our favorites. And the next one I'm going to do is called the wheat ear. And the wheat ear, if I'm not saying it very clearly, is really a beautiful stitch. Let me do it with the thick thread, just so you can see it.
She went down to June without.
Yeah, she calls it the weeder or something, kind of.
Well, that's because she has an accent.
Mm-hmm.
I have a Utah accent, so.
I mean, it's even spelled with her accent.
Yeah.
It's even. It's different.
One thing you can do, and I don't have, let me see if I can find a pen really quickly. Well, I've got this one I can try. Because I'm not doing this for any purpose, but I would do it with a friction pen rather than a regular pen. But with the wheat ear, you can either draw a line or you can do imaginary lines. And let me just turn to that. The wheat ear stitch is on page 172. But you could draw 3 lines.
So you can use your friction pen on that and then just press it.
You can,
She calls for a white pencil all the time.
Yeah, I've got one here, but it's not going to show up on this light color. If you were doing a darker one, it would. So this is going to be a big wheat ear. You probably aren't going to do it this big. In the past, when I saw this stitch, like when I was doing a crazy quilt, I didn't realize how it was done. I just did a chain stitch and then did the little sticks in it, which you could do. It looks the same. But actually the wheat ear is done this way. You start on one of the legs, not on the center. And then however long you want your stitch, let's do it, it's a little more than a quarter. Well, let's do it as long as it is wide. So I make this diagonal stitch, come back up here, and that makes my V.
Oh, okay.
Then I come down the stitch length and bring my thread up. And then what I'm going to do is come under here, not catching the background, not catching the wool. And through here. And back down in that same hole. So next time I'm going to probably come halfway in the middle of that stitch right there. So I'm going to bring it up to here. It's kind of a wide wheat ear. And make my V. And then come down a stitch length towards me. And I'm going to come under here without catching the background, and under this leg. And then back into that same hole. But you can see how you could almost do the chain stitch and then do the little
Yeah, you could.
legs.
That's the way you'd think that, yeah. So you go to the middle of the,
So first I make my V.
what I mean is this is where I get messed up. I don't go to the middle of this stitch. You need to go to the middle of that stitch so you're not, because I was doing it like straight, yeah, that makes more sense.
And then come down a stitch length. And go under this one and under this one. And wrap it around and come back in the same hole. But it makes a really beautiful stitch. Rather dramatic. That I could pull that just a little bit tighter.
So you could do it, of course, with narrower lines. What it calls for.
Definitely. I just did it big
Yeah.
so you could see it
Yeah.
a little bit better. Okay, I did want to just talk about a couple of the blocks, and would you hand me the book right there? That, I think it's Suzanne's. So these are the ones that you'll be doing this time, and some of you have already worked on them. So we've done most of these stitches, back stitches. One thing that some people had a question on was this one right here. And I just gave you one piece of the stripe, but they turned this little one and applique it on top. So what I did in this block is I took my piece of fabric with a stripe and I cut it into 4 pieces and then turned them so the stripe would go the other way. And that's why some people, were worried because they didn't have this extra piece to applique on the top. So I turned them, sewed them back together, and then I got my piece of...
Oh, you sewed them back together.
And then I got my piece of blue wool that is the center part right here. And then I just laid it on top of here after I had it appliqued. And appliqued it on. She's actually pieced it.
Yeah, it looks like it was machine pieced or whatever, hand pieced.
But I actually just laid this piece over the top of it and then appliqued it on.
So the fabric's larger than you need, so you cut it into the 4 pieces.
Yeah, and
then
that's how I did
And you're
it.
needle turning it or whatever you do. You're
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So you'd needle turn here and here and here.
And then just using
And
those
so
threads
that
to
made
do-
it so I could put the stripes any way I wanted.
Okay.
I think I might have done it this way. I don't know. I can't remember. But she actually, you know how I'm not very good at reading instructions? She actually appliqued this little piece on top after the rest. But that just seems like an extra piece for me that you don't really have to do. The rest are pretty self-explanatory, I think. Your fabrics may look a little bit different, but I think they will work. You're doing a lot of couching here with your rickrack. With rickrack, you can couch just across one like this. With your thread going that way, you can cross them like this. It will give you a little bit different effect. So try different ways of couching, and even if you do it with a different kind of thread, you can see how this one she's done with a little bit heavier and maybe darker thread, so it shows up more. Sometimes she'll put little French knots on them to give a little bit of texture. I probably didn't do that on all of mine. But that's kind of a basic run through. What other questions do you have about these?
Oh, Lynn's about done with hers.
Lynn didn't put her bunny on.
No, she.
I said, that's fine.
She don't
She
want a
said
rabbit. She did
she wanted a
garden.
flower garden.
Yeah,
so
flower
she
garden.
just did flowers. And next time, there's more piecing in these. And so some of you, there's the one with 1,000 drizzles on it.
Oh my goodness, yeah, how fun is that? Do we have enough thread for that?
There are actually some of these that I had to buy more than one of. This color.
That's the ones that drizzle? No, is it?
That one's
Yeah.
drizzled. And she uses this color of thread right here.
Is it a 3?
I'm not sure which one she uses. I'd have to look.
My word.
But there is more piecing next time and applique. These are probably the most, I don't know if it's difficult, the most complex houses of all of the ones that you will get next time. Some of you will pick them up and start some of these. But this one I've actually given you a variety of things. On mine, I did, you don't have to, but I think I kind of did one side darker than the other side. like a log cabin would
okay.
normally be.
Oh,
And I don't think she's really followed that pattern. I think they're pretty random.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just little tiny pieces, but I did do one side just a little darker than the other side. And then the light side, you have to outline. I mean, just remember that outlining is something that you can do. If you don't think that it stands out enough, then use a little contrasting thread and go around them. But they're fun. Are you having fun doing it?
do all of you
I'm
have
learning.
the number
Good.
103 thread?
103.
103, I haven't been able to get, but I can go over there and look.
Oh, we did.
Did you see?
We went over, yeah.
And I think I'll
Looked
turn this off,
everywhere.
but thanks for joining us.
103.